What's up, you guys? Sean Ross Sapp here for the Fightful.com podcast, or November 9th edition. I sure as hell wish it was October 9th right now. I could prepare myself for what lies ahead. Either way, I am here with Showdown Joe. We're talking UFC 205. We're talking Jon Jones. We're talking a little bit of UFC 206, technically. Joe, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good, my man, but I can tell you one thing. Being a Canadian, the only thing that has been on all airwaves up here is obviously the whole situation that happened down there with Donald Trump being named or being voted upon as president of the United States. It's been such a massive story here in Canada that the former station that I used to work at, Sportsnet 590 The Fan, every show from the morning show when I woke up this morning all the way up until my drive home, every topic had nothing to do with the NHL, NBA, UFC, Major League Baseball. They threw in some stuff here and there, but it's all been about Trump, 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 Trump. So let me ask you, being a resident of America, what is going on down there? How have you received this this information, this news, this big, huge new president you guys have?
Well, I'll tell you a couple of things. I know that Canada's immigration site crashed due to traffic last night.
That is 100% correct.
And I know that if I need to apply for a work visa, I have a couple of respected Canadians that I can list as references on such. Unfortunately, Jimmy Van let me know that houses in the Toronto area are like $1 million a pop now. So he'd have to come off of a raise or something like that. Something would have to happen. But no, I'll see how it goes. But I let my thoughts on that be known earlier. There's good and bad. Like I said, as me, I'm a 31-year-old white guy in the middle class who gets paid by Canadians. It's not going to affect me that much.
So it was obviously, during my work day today and dealing with so many different colleagues and talking about it, I guess as a Canadian and as myself, I'm not heavily into politics. I don't follow it as closely as perhaps I should, even with my own Canadian politics. It's not something that I sort of pay too much close attention to. I kind of do look at what I need to look at and understand what each candidate wants to stand for. But tell me if I'm wrong. And again, I have not been channel surfing with television stations, be it, whether it's NBC, CNN, Fox, or what we have up here. I don't hear any of the editorials and people saying what they want to say. But from all I've heard up here was pretty much negativity that Trump became the president of the United States. But I find it, and correct me if I'm wrong, you just, pull the wool over my eyes if you want to. If he was elected president of the United States, that means the majority of people elected him.
Nope.
All right.
Not at all.
Let me hear
Lost the popular vote. Won the electoral.
So how does that work down there?
So this actually happened in 2000 as well, although more controversially. Because we are state-based, we don't want to leave other states out in the cold. So each state is assigned a certain number of electoral votes based on their population. Because, there are some areas like Los Angeles, New York, Miami, Chicago, almost unanimously Democratic. So if it were just a popular vote, it's almost a guarantee Democrats win. They've won 6 of the last 7 popular votes, but only 5 it's much less. It's like, I think they've won 4 of the last 7 electoral votes. Now, that has led to some controversy, people thinking maybe we need to do electorals for the electoral, but it's all based on population, and states are assigned a certain number. Whoever can get above 270 gets it. I'll send you a video, but basically it's so the best interests of the nation are reflected. But, a lot of people are upset because the most people didn't vote for the guy and he got in. But we'll see. We'll see how it works. Maybe.
Maybe. All right. Do I have anything to worry about when I head down there to cover Titan at the end of the month, beginning of end of November, beginning of December? Like, my Canadian passport's going to allow me into the country, right, Sean?
Sure. You're coming across the right border. I'll tell you that much.
Oh, here we go. All right, should be fun. Can I get back home though?
Maybe. I don't know.
I'm looking forward to going down to Miami. I love America. I love traveling to all the different cities out there. I've been to so many, and that's not going to change anytime soon. So,
well, I think that vacations to your homeland are going to be much more frequent these days, and especially extended stays. But either way, I don't. We'll see how it affects things. We'll talk a little more politics at the end of the show, perhaps. That way, we'll just save it for then. Either way, UFC 205 is this Saturday, and this is the reason we do this job. This is the whole point, Joe. You've got features coming this week. We've got all kinds of stories coming. David Tees has stuff, live viewing parties, guys. Fightful.com is the place to be. Now, before we get into that, one fight is off that show. It's Tim Kennedy and Rashad Evans. Unforeseen issues regarding medicals arised, and it pulled them both from the show. Now, if Tim Kennedy gives the UFC credit for how they handled the situation, they must be doing a pretty damn good job, because he has said prior, I may never fight for the UFC again after UFC 205. And not only is he doing that, they have rescheduled, or they've targeted the fight for 206, which I think is a great thing. It's almost a blessing in disguise, Joe, because UFC 205 doesn't miss a damn thing without this fight. But UFC 206, it gets a real solid shot in the arm. Now, I say that, and our favorite Nikita Krylov fan, Corey Cropper, really put things in perspective for me a couple of years ago, and he said, and I quote, "Why would anybody ever pay money to watch a Rashad Evans fight?" Well, on this show, on 206, I kind of understand why it needed this fight. What do you think of the situation in general, the medicals, this coming up such last moment? What do you think of them moving into 206 and how it affects both cards?
Well, it's definitely, like I said, a shot in the arm for UFC 206, and you know, I'm not complaining. I get to see Rashad. Right. I understand what
you should complain.
No. I know lately Rashad obviously hasn't looked like the Rashad of old when he was the light heavyweight champion of the world. But from a friend perspective, he's always been a great guy. I see him a lot when I'm in Miami, or not a lot. I see him, often when I'm in Miami covering Titan. So I've always had a soft spot for Rashad Evans. I think he's a fantastic guy. He's not the fighter that he was in the past, and it's going to be I will look forward to seeing this fight here, and especially with Tim Kennedy, all the different stuff that he's been going through and saying and doing over the past little while. So I get to see it in front of my eyes. Chances are you might be there. So all right, so it's something kind of cool. What do you say? 206 is Toronto, right? Or 207 is Toronto?
Correct. 206 is Toronto.
Yeah, I'm getting lost here for a second. Yeah, so I don't, to tell you the truth, man, I don't mind seeing this fight. I think it's going to be a fun one to watch, and it won't be what we would love to have seen about 2-3 years ago, but it doesn't do a thing to UFC 205. And I had this conversation before I came on the air, as my wife says to me, she goes, "There's a UFC event on this weekend, isn't there?" I said, honey, let me, and she's like, she just looked at me. She goes, "Don't start with me." I said, no, hold on. I said, "You've heard me say this before, but I'm not joking this time."
This year, multiple times.
This is the greatest UFC, the biggest UFC event of all time. Sean, she looked at me and said, yeah, just like last Saturday's and the Saturday before that. And I said, no, I'm telling you, it actually is. She's like, okay. She's like, "Are you watching it from home or are you going out to watch it?" I said, no, I got to do a podcast. I got to do the podcast afterwards. I said, "There's a lot of work that's got to be done." So, and Tim getting taken off this card doesn't really do anything, really. It's so stacked and it's fantastic. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. I am concerned about this medical situation, what it actually was, what it actually is. But the fact that he can fight, 6 weeks later, or not even 6 weeks later, but a month later, it's kind of puzzling.
And Dana White posted a picture of him at 195 pounds. Damn. Dude looked good. Yeah. He looked better than I've ever seen him. So now UFC 206 has Cormier Rumble, Max Holloway, Anthony Pettis. If they can make it happen, Rashad Evans versus Tim Kennedy. You have Krylov versus Serkinov. I think I pronounced that right. Cub Swanson versus Duho Choi. You have the return of Lando Venata.
Our boy.
And you have Valerie Letourneau on the card. Also, even though it's two guys that are coming off of, I think, back-to-back losses, you have a top 15 flyweight fight in Makovsky versus Dustin Ortiz. So you got that Rashad Evans versus Tim Kennedy, like we said, doesn't hurt UFC 205 a bit. Honestly, probably helps it a little bit because of that later start time. Extra length of the show. I'm cool with them taking a fight off if they're running this show to 2 a.m. But for 206, thumbs up. Thumbs up, UFC. You did the right thing. You did the right thing here. I'm cool with that. Now, before we get into 205, Jon Jones.
Oh, boy.
Suspended for 1 year. Did you see his
No, I didn't.
Oh, my God. I'll pull it up. So, suspended for 1 year after he took, and I quote, a dick pill given to him by a friend. That is his terminology, not mine. So, basically, the situation is, had he disclosed it on his paperwork, he would have probably faced a 6-month suspension. However, he did not disclose it. He'll return in July. Now, this is still a pretty damn good scenario for himself and the UFC. Joe, your take on Jon Jones, his suspension, also cleared of being, and the arbiters, quote, a drug cheat. He is not a drug cheat. He did not knowingly take something in order to gain an advantage. What do you think this means for Jon Jones' legacy, and what do you think this ruling means for him personally and the UFC?
To be honest with you, and the fact that he got stripped of the interim title, again, good call by the UFC on that one there. Yeah. Do you feel like this is ever going to end for Jon Jones? Has he finally learned his lesson? I don't think he has. I don't feel like he has. I would love to imagine that, yeah, you know what, this is it. He screwed up enough times to realize, you know, and according to Dana, he's lost about $12 to $15 million with all these transgressions here. It could be true, could be wrong, could be, you know, inflated numbers, but he's really messed up his career and taken, you know, a long time out of his prime, despite being, you know, we make the argument he's pound for pound one of the best in the sport. He's taken so much time away that it's almost to the point where it's like, I don't care, man. Like, you want to fight. It's who knows what kind of he makes more headlines outside of the octagon sometimes than he does inside the octagon, and we want to see him fight. We just want to see him compete.
Sure.
We just want to see him do well, but you know, he's not going to be back till July. And again, I wrote the article a while back or last week or so that, you know, there's a pay-per-view draw coming back, and the UFC's pay-per-view cycle is going to be fantastic, closing off 2016, going into 2017. Well, you now need to remove Jon Jones from that equation, because it wasn't too long. I mean, wasn't it Dana White and Jon Jones that came out and said, listen, man, we found out what this is all about. It's going to be great. He's going to come back way sooner than we anticipated. July 2017, ladies and gentlemen. That is not much sooner than we anticipated.
It's a lot sooner than 2 years, that's for sure. But here's a look at his profile photo. You see that? You see the crying Jordan face? At least he's in on the joke at this point. I'll give him credit. He's in on the joke. So, hey, he's making the best of it. Now, also announced, he will be on a Flow grappling event next month, wrestling Dan Henderson. First off, boy, is he going to kick the living shit out of Dan Henderson in a wrestling match at this stage or not. I think it's a good move for him. I think it's a good move for probably all involved. Dan Henderson's going to make some money. Jon Jones is going to make some money. It's definitely a great idea for Flow. Keeps him active. It's about the extent of what he can do. Good move, bad move?
I think it's a good move. I think it's a good move because for a variety of reasons, like you mentioned. Number one, it keeps him active, and hopefully he actually trains for this or actually does some good training for it. You're not training for a fight, which is completely different, but you are training for something at somewhat of an elite level. We know Dan Henderson is much older and just in a different sort of part of his career. I mean, he's not even competing anymore. He's done. But despite having a pretty damn good fight in his last fight there with Bisping, It also keeps Jon relevant because maybe not all mainstream media outlets are going to cover it, but we will still cover it. A lot of the MMA sites will cover it, which eventually, some way, somehow bleeds in to other mainstream outlets. There's a lot of sites out there that actually go into mainstream outlets. So it keeps Jon relevant, keeps him active, it keeps his name in the headlines and in the news. Listen, Jon, this guy's a mixed martial artist. He should be fighting in the octagon and gaining as much money from his brand that he can now, as opposed to fighting for, not in the octagon, if you know what I'm saying.
So with that being said, we have UFC 205. This is the big one. We will be here right after the pay-per-view with a podcast. We're going to have articles all week, live viewing parties. We have a live viewing party for Bellator the night before, too, from Israel. I have an interview with Bellator welterweight champion Andrei Koreshkov coming soon. That was fun to I'm sure for whoever transcribed that thing, I'm sure that was a blast. He spoke through a translator, and the translator's phone was straight dookie. I'll say that much. But this show, there's not really a fight that we can just gloss over and not talk about. There's some we can talk about a little quicker. But to kick off the show, we've got Liz Carmouche, who hasn't fought in ages. It seems like she hasn't fought since the Rousey fight, but she has. But it's been a year and a half. April 2015, and she beat Lauren Murphy. So glad to see Liz Carmouche back in the cage, but they got her up against a prospect in Caitlin Chikagan. Like, this is a top 15 battle. This is a really good one. I think it's an excellent way to start the show as well. It's a Fight Pass prelim, but who you have taken this fight, and got to be good to see Liz back in the cage.
Yeah, Liz is a sweetheart. She's absolutely fantastic, and yeah, like you said, she hasn't been competing in a while. I'm just gonna wonder what kind of ring rust, quote, octagon rust, she may or may not have, because Caitlin is going to put the pressure on very, very quickly and early, and I'm going to assume she's going to do her very best to put Liz on her heels and get her moving backwards as much as possible while maintaining distance, but keeping just fighting smart. Liz is going to have her hands full. I think this one will go the full 15 minutes. To say who's going to win, it'll be hard to say. I don't know. Is it too early for Caitlin to fight someone like Liz? You can make that argument because Liz has been around. She's fought for that title before. It's one of those fights. I mean, I didn't look at the odds for any of these fights just yet because that was something I was going to focus on with one of my pieces later this week. But I'd like to lean towards Liz, but that rust, that octagon rust, that ring rust is kind of giving me I don't know, this one could be a pick'em.
Liz Carmouche, since December 2013, has fought twice. That raises concerns with me, but the UFC is really in a win-win situation here because if Caitlin Chikagan wins, she knocked off a former title challenger who was real close to beating Ronda Rousey. Like, that was very close. If Liz Carmouche wins, then they have a former champion who knocked off an up-and-coming talent, top 15 talent, though. So it's not like it's somebody – she's unheard of. Nobody knows who Caitlin Chikagan is, but it'd still be a very impressive win. Thiago Alves, Jim Miller. Thiago Alves at 155 pounds. What you think brought that on?
Am I allowed to say no comment on the show? Yeah.
Change in diet?
A little change in horse meat, removing the horse meat from the diet. Have you heard from Gleason Tibau lately? Anyways, Jim Miller, Thiago Alves at 155 pounds. It'd be interesting to see. He's still going to suffer. He's still going to suffer cutting to 155. Let's not kid ourselves. Say what you will, he's going to suffer to get to 155 pounds, a weight division that Jim Miller knows all too well. I think, in my opinion, there will be some gassing in this fight. No pun intended. And I think Jim Miller should emerge victorious in this fight sometime, I'm going to assume, late second, third round.
So we talked about how Liz Carmouche has been out of the cage for so long. So has Thiago Alves. Since May of 2015, he lost it to Carlos Condit. he doesn't have like a big. I mean, the him beating Jordan Main, it's a pretty good win. But since like Josh Koscheck in 08, he doesn't have a real standout win. But this is the guy who is also a former title challenger. He was in one of the big fights at UFC 100. So he's in a fight, definitely a much different situation at UFC 205. But there's so much. There's like so much unknown about Thiago Alves at this stage. Like, one, how's he going to look at age 33, dropping weight? I don't think he's ever fought at lightweight before. I don't think ever. And this is a guy who used to have trouble making 170.
And that's and that's what I'm saying. Despite whatever we want to,
and then when he did make weight, he tested positive for diuretic one time. So
hence the term, he's going to suffer to make 155, in my opinion.
Yeah. And Jim Miller, he brings a fight no matter who it is. It doesn't matter. That Jim Miller is just that guy that no matter who you put him against, whether it's a completely unranked just jabroni, he's going to mow him down. But anybody from number 1 to number 15, it's a toss-up. You don't know if he's taking it. You don't know if he's losing it. And I mean anybody at 155, even the two guys in the main event. You put Jim Miller in there with him, there's no guarantee that they're going to beat this guy. But, you know, it's not saying that he could knock them off either. That's just the way his career's been. It's so funny that he and Joe Lozon, they've fought twice because they have had that similar – they have those similar trajectories. So I'm stoked for that fight. Can't wait for that. That's a really good one. Some good matchmaking there. Vicente Luque versus, I believe this is one of, I believe this is your boy, Bilal Muhammad. Now, I'll say this fight sticks out like a sore thumb on this card, doesn't it?
I love it. I absolutely love it. And
I'm sure you did. I was like, I'm sure it sticks out like a sore thumb to Joe too, but for all the right reasons. Now, I'm not taking anything away from either one of these guys. It's just like, hey, these dudes got a good spot, didn't they?
Yeah, they're on a pretty damn you can really make some noise for yourself considering you're kicking off the show on Fox. So get ready to rock and roll. And you know that you've seen Bilal compete twice in the octagon, and this guy brings it. No ifs, no ands, or buts. This guy loves to fight. And, you know, don't even ask me for my opinion who's going to win this fight. It'll be very, very difficult for me to start picking against Bilal Muhammad until he really starts moving up the 170-pound ladder, because, you know, he's just, I mean, I feel like I owe this guy so much gratitude for some of the stuff that he was able to do for our broadcast at Titan that I will never turn my back on this guy and pick against him. Well, eventually I may have to, because he'll start competing against people that I know on a personal level as well, and I'll have to really make a decision. But Vicente, his pal, he's competing against. His pal. You know, it's going to be a tough fight for Bilal. He's getting better. He's getting stiffer competition. But yeah, you know what? I think Bilal's going to get us up to 170-pound rankings. He just keeps bringing it, and he understands his placement on this card. He understands he is kicking off the Fox prelims, so he knows he's got to put on a show, because when doesn't he put on a show? But yeah, I'm looking forward to him competing. It's just he always puts a smile on my face. You know that, Sean.
I was going to say, like, as we started to talk about this, I was going to say, Joe, it seems like every other month we've talked about him fighting. We have talked about him every other damn month since we launched the site, because he fights all the time. Every 2 months, like clockwork, he has fought in the UFC. So
the boy's got to get paid.
Props to him for staying active. That's awesome. So he's looking to get into that 6 digits this year. That's what he's trying to do. Looking forward to that fight. Also, Rafael Natal versus Tim Boetsch. Tim Boetsch, just like I said, the kind of guy you can never count out, even if he's lost 3 fights in a row, even if he's lost 2 of 8, or if he's won 2 of 8. You just never know how it'll end up with a guy like Tim Boetsch. This is a guy who he and Natal have had way different trajectories. Like, Tim Boetsch has lost 3 of his last 4. Natal has won 4 of his last 5. That being said, the UFC, like how I said that earlier, was a win-win situation. This isn't a win-win situation, but it's certainly a no-lose situation because I don't see any major plans for either one of these two guys. But it's a hell of a fight to put together.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at this, the way these two guys match up, you start wondering yourself, what does this fight really mean? Well, hey, it's a fight on the contract. You have to compete, but what does it mean for the rankings, and what does it mean for each guy? We know Tim Boetsch he's had his run. Natal, you could probably say the same thing. He's had his run, but if there's more upside, I guess you could think of Natal, but Boetsch has the bigger name in my opinion. So it's a fun fight to say the least. They're going to stand and bang. They're going to go at each other hard. I'm going to give that speed advantage to Natal, believe it or not, but at the same time, Boetsch has the power advantage, and if it gets closer in the clinch, Natal won't be afraid, but whatever he can with his dirty boxing to cause some damage. I think this one's going to be a 15-minute, in the great words of Jim Ross, slobber knocker. I mean, these guys are going to go back and forth over and over again until somebody either goes down or the time runs out. And, I'm looking forward to it. Unfortunately, I would love to have seen this fight. We talked about Tim Kennedy and the Rashad Evans fight. This would have been a nice one to see about 3-4 years ago as well. So it's got a little vintage flavor to it, but I'm looking forward to it, man. It's going to be a good tilt, and don't step away from your television. Don't leave your seat if you're at the arena. This one's going to be a fun one to watch.
This Friday is Veterans Day, so I want to definitely thank all of our veterans. And in honor of them, I have a certain group of military friends I've never served, but as they like to say, they've been in the shit. After this fight, we are in the shit, Joe, because it gets really real. Khabib Nurmagomedov, the former #1 lightweight, until Tony Ferguson, I believe, rightfully unseated him, and I was a Tony Ferguson doubter before this weekend. Khabib Nurmagomedov against Michael Johnson. Just like I said about Tim Boetsch, just like I said with Jim Miller, Michael Johnson is not the kind of guy that you would expect to make a run at a title, but Michael Johnson is the kind of guy you could never count out against anybody in the division, because as we saw against Dustin Poirier, I had completely written him off, and then he put Dustin Poirier to sleep in about 90 seconds. He's facing Khabib Nurmagomedov, and Khabib has not faced this type of competition in 2.5 years since Dos Anjos. How do you think this goes? I think it's great that Khabib got that fight against Darrell Horcher earlier this year. I think it's great that it still happened. How do you think this one's going to go? Because Khabib has to win this fight if he wants to be in that title conversation now, because Tony Ferguson made a big statement last weekend.
I'm wondering if come Sunday morning when we do the podcast, if you're actually going to say Khabib Nurmagomedov is officially the #1 contender again. I think he does emerge victorious in this fight, taking nothing away from Johnson, because he's just continues to surprise everyone in the strangest of ways. You think he's going to win, he loses. You think he's going to get his ass whooped, he ends up winning, a la Dustin Poirier, that incredible fight there, that stand and bang, and the way he was able to slip those punches or land the uppercut and just do what he does. But despite Nurmagomedov's time off, and quote unquote people call it a tune-up fight, I think Khabib is going to emerge victorious in this fight here, make that statement, provided he has his head in the fight, which I'm sure he will, despite his current, public disgust with the UFC. Conor McGregor got this title shot, and he keeps getting, it's a theory that may never get spoken out loud, but it's one of those things that's sort of, when it comes to UFC fighters, it's a hard one to explain. Sometimes you necessarily, in my opinion, this is pure speculation, and just based on my own conversations with people in the industry, peers and whatnot, and never UFC ever, they don't really want champions that can't really. They may not want champions that, and Nurmagomedov could easily become a world champion, which would be fantastic for their entry into Russia, over into Europe and stuff like that. So, if you could sort of delay it here and there until it has to happen, I could understand if the UFC did that. But there's going to come a time, in my opinion, when You just can't. And he's already, did he not say that if he doesn't get a title shot after this, he's going to walk and the UFC will never be allowed into Russia because he will block them?
Yeah, and somehow I don't doubt that that's possible, given what I've seen in the political landscape over the last 24 hours. So anything is possible in this world. Now, here's my thing. All due respect to Khabib Nurmagomedov, you got to beat somebody besides Daryl Horcher in the last 2.5 years. You got to do it. That doesn't get you a title shot. Had he been ready to fight right after Dos Anjos? Hell yeah, man. Absolutely. I'm all aboard the Khabib hype train. Now, beating Michael Johnson's going to answer a lot of questions because Khabib's striking has never looked solid, in my opinion. It's looked okay. But Michael Johnson's going to test that. You better believe he knows what's up on the ground. And Michael Johnson probably has no desire to go to the ground because we have seen Khabib literally take people down almost 24 times in one fight. It's like it was a game. Like he was playing EA UFC 2 and he was just trolling people. Okay, I'll just throw you down again. That's Khabib. But Michael Johnson can put anybody in that division to sleep, so that's going to be a real big test. A bigger test than Michael Johnson's record would indicate, in my opinion. We have another awesome fight on Fox Sports 1. Now, these are just the free fights we've been talking about, you guys. Former UFC lightweight champion Frankie Edgar against Jeremy Stephens. Now, some of you may ask, Jeremy Stephens?
You could have played that clip right there if you had saved it into the system. It would have been a perfect opportunity for you to hit the button and hear Conor McGregor's voice.
I looked for the solo soundbite, so here's why. Yesterday, in the midst of all this election talk, somebody tried to say, it was on, you all may know Shane Helms, the Hurricane. You know who he is?
Yep.
The wrestler, the Hurricane? Okay. Friend of mine, he's on Facebook. And he posted some controversial stuff, and he was asking about like why IDs are mandatory for voting or why they're not. And somebody said, you can get arrested for walking around without an ID. And I'm like, no, you can't. That's not a thing that's real. And this dude who was a wrestler, an indie wrestler, I guess I found out, he was like trying to troll me. And he goes, he was like, that's why you failed in the wrestling business. I'm like, I make my full-time living in the wrestling business. I don't know. And I wanted to hit him with the, who the fuck is that guy? Because I didn't know who he was. And apparently he was a wrestler. I didn't know him. But I didn't want to be that guy. But I let it go. But I was like, man. But then I looked on my Facebook profile. I have myself listed as low-level pro wrestler, like sarcastically. And I was like, shit, I wrestle twice a year for charity. I never made a go at that, and I wouldn't have anyway. It's not my thing, but I wanted to use that soundbite for that, and I was like, oh, gosh, I need to get that soundbite. It's isolated, but I couldn't find it anywhere, just that quote. So I was like, I don't want to come back like 6 hours later with it because then I'll look like a real jackass. Facebook, man. Me, if you all don't have me and Shane Helms on your all-time Facebook shit-starting team, you're doing it wrong because we stir it up. Either way, Frankie Edgar versus Jeremy, who the F is that guy, Stephens? You have to believe that Jeremy Stephens is forever changed due to that. He is going to be looking to tell people who the fuck he is, pardon my language. And Frankie Edgar, man, he was so close to that McGregor fight. Had he won, this would be him in the main event. It would be probably Edgar versus McGregor because McGregor is smart, and he knows that that would be the draw. Edgar's got to keep plugging away. How do you think this one goes?
I think Frankie wins this fight. No chance in hell I would ever pick against Frankie Edgar, despite my disappointment in that bout versus Jose Aldo Jr. and the way it went down. Jose Aldo was just on a completely different level than Frankie Edgar, and that says a lot because did everything impossible to try and tag Jose Aldo, and Jose Aldo appeared to be looking at Frankie Edgar like he was in slow motion. There's just a different level with the guys at the very top of this division, and I believe Frankie Edgar is at the top of his division, whereas Jeremy Stephens is on the cusp. He's there. He could be in the conversation. I just think Frankie is better, despite Jeremy's power, and despite that he can knock Frankie into the second row. Totally get that. Totally understand that. I just think Frankie's pace, I'm not saying he's got that Dominic Cruz footwork, but his pace is going to be just a little too much for Jeremy Stephens, and eventually he will catch him. Can this fight go 15 minutes? Of course it can. I don't think it will. I think Frankie's going to prove a point here, and then potentially take a shot at Conor McGregor again, or mention something. He may not take a shot at him, but just say, listen, man, let's do this. We got to figure this out. Let's do it. Because we don't know what Jose Aldo's going to do, because he flip-flops with his opinion, whether he's fighting, retiring, leaving, coming back, not fighting. We don't know. So with a victory here, Frankie Edgar can really continue to keep himself relevant, position himself in that title mix, depending on whatever Conor McGregor decides to do, depending on what he does in the main event on Saturday night.
Then maybe Edgar versus the winner of Pettis Holloway for the interim championship.
Could.
The UFC could have a very similar problem at 145 that they had at 135 for years. Frankie Edgar, you compare him to, he's always drawn comparisons to Uriah Faber. They even had a quote-unquote super fight. I thought it was a super fight personally, but can't always knock off those top guys, but he's beating everybody else, and I don't know if anybody else can beat him. So that's a real issue. Main event or main card pay-per-view. Former UFC bantamweight champion Miesha Tate versus Raquel Pennington. Now, a lot of people, much like with Jeremy Stephens, may say, who the F is Raquel Pennington? Well, let me tell you who Raquel Pennington is. She is incredibly underrated, for one. She had, at the time, I thought was one of the better women's MMA fights I'd ever seen with my buddy Jessamyn Duke on The Ultimate Fighter. That was a real banger. I loved that fight. But since coming to the UFC, Joe, she is 4-2 with her 2 losses being split decisions. So on any given night, if there would have been one different judge on each of those panels, she could be 6-0 in the UFC. Now, I didn't think her fight with Holly Holm was as close as the scorecards read. I thought Holly Holm took that fight. But she has shown that she can weather storms. She's shown that she can finish people. I go back to that Ashley Evans Smith bulldog choke. Man, hey, you want to get on my good side. Finishing somebody with a bulldog choke is a fantastic way to do it, especially putting them in a situation where they can't sit out of it. Oh, man. That was sick. This is a hell of a fight. Raquel Pennington, however, one of those girls who, she probably really wishes there was a 125 division, because she would really benefit from that. And with Joanna Jędrzejczyk saying, hey, I might retire in a year or two because of these weight cuts and things like that, maybe a 125 division ends up coming, but this is a solid fight, hell of a fight, a former champion versus someone who at any given time could probably challenge for that title. What do you got here?
About Raquel Pennington in your setup there, not much talk about Miesha Tate. And in thinking about this fight here, Raquel's going to be super hungry to take out her former coach on The Ultimate Fighter. While Miesha's got to be thinking, what the hell happened to me? I became the champion and I lost it. I was ready to go on this run and, I got my nose busted. What? And I got to now do this all over again while Ronda Rousey is now stepping in there and fighting for the title. So Miesha's got to be one miserable woman. Right? What is going on here? So wherever her head's at.
Hey, one victory, she could be right back there. And Tate versus Rousey 3 is a real possibility, especially if the UFC thinks that Rousey might not be around for a long time, because they're going to milk that cow while it's there. And no, I'm not calling Rousey or Tate cows, so don't give me that shit, guys.
Cash cows.
It's just yes, cash cows. And that view of things, yes, they are cows because they are both worth a lot of money. But Tate has won 5 of her last 6. She dropped that fight against Amanda Nunes, but she could be right there if Rousey wins and if Tate wins against Pennington.
Yeah, it's to me, it's just a matter of where's Misha's head heading into this fight, and I'm about 99.9% confident it's going to be in the right place. I think in essence, for your theory to come true, she's got to get a finish and she's got to make a statement in this fight, and then do the right thing on the mic afterwards. Because I got to think she's just so pissed at herself and pissed at the situation, the way it went down. There was like, I was the champion. She finally got what she wanted and was ready to go on this run, and it just boom, disappeared on her. And then Ronda comes back and gets the title shot. So to me, it's like, I think she should win this fight. I really, really do. But I think she's got to make a serious statement with either a beatdown, a TKO, or a finish that's going to send MSG in the world. It's sort of in this shock and awe sort of theory. Yeah, I do think she's going to win, Sean. It won't be easy because Raquel's going to try and make her own little statement here, because if she takes out Miesha Tate, holy smoke, is this division again an absolute disaster. We've been saying it for months. This division is insane. At one point, people were laughing when it was introduced into the UFC. Meanwhile, it's nonstop conversation anytime these ladies at 135 compete.
Kelvin Gastelum, Donald Cerrone. Now, this is very interesting because if Donald Cerrone wins, he's right up there. He is a contender. And to be honest with you, if for some reason something happened and Wonderboy Thompson couldn't fight, Donald Cerrone's asking for that title fight at 205 this week. And the thing is, he could win it. He could win it. There's no reason he couldn't. He's facing Kelvin Gastelum. Now, the interesting thing is when Kelvin Gastelum has lost, it's usually against people who don't pressure him. That ain't Donald Cerrone. That is not Donald Cerrone at all. This is not going to be Gastelum Hendricks. It's not going to be Gastelum Magny. It's not going to be Gastelum Woodley. It's not going to be Gastelum Rick Story. It's certainly as hell not going to be Gastelum versus Uriah Hall. Donald Cerrone is a guy, you know what he's going to do, and sometimes there's just nothing you can do about it. Now, Gastelum is supremely talented. Not only that, he's 25 years old. He's still evolving. But, man, the kind of role that Donald Cerrone has been on has been overlooked, Joe. Like, I just don't think people understand it. It's hard to he doesn't really give you time to understand it. He doesn't give you time to comprehend it. But let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. He's won 11 of his last 12 fights. The only person to beat him in the last 3.5 years is Rafael Dos Anjos. The only people to beat him in the last 7 years are Ben Henderson, Nate Diaz, Anthony Pettis, Dos Anjos. He has wins over Ben Henderson, Eddie Alvarez. Now, granted, he should not have had that win over Ben Henderson. And then he jumped right up to welterweight, and it's like, oh, no problem. No big deal. He got taken down a little bit by Rick Story, popped up, hit him with the old
greatest four-punch combination ever, or the greatest four-strike combination ever.
Now, I've taught kickboxing. I used to teach women's kickboxing at Iron Fist Gym, and I've tried to replicate that, like his mechanics. It's so effortless for him. It's so effortless. Like, there's no bringing your hand back. There's no, it's perfect. It was a perfect combination. I see him being able to do that. I don't want to say with relative ease, but I don't know, probably outside of maybe the two guys that are competing for the title, I think would give him the most trouble, ironically, with that. And, one Damian Maia, who he's called out because Damian Maia may grab a hold of him. Just another great fight. And Donald Cerrone, I think he could be, I don't want to say the next big UFC pay-per-view draw, but I don't know how he's not a big UFC pay-per-view draw already.
People love him. I know for a fact people love him. People do talk about him, not as much as we would talk about Conor McGregor, Ronda Rousey, George St. Pierre, but people do always mention Cowboy to me in passing. So when this fight first got put together, the first thing that went through my mind was, is there an opportunity that Kelvin Gastelum, and I propose this question to you, Sean, because I've had this conversation with a few other people. My initial answer was yes, and quickly turned to no, and I'll tell you why after you give me your answer. Is there an opportunity here that Kelvin Gastelum potentially could big brother Donald Cerrone?
Sure, absolutely. I think so. Kelvin Gastelum is a 170-pounder that probably should be fighting at 185. Because he's had some issues, a lot of issues with weight. Donald Cerrone is a 170-pounder who has said that he could make 145 if the money was right. But he is a natural 170-pounder. I think it's absolutely possible that Kelvin Gastelum big brothers Donald Cerrone. It's just a matter of if he can do it before Donald Cerrone hits some killer instinct ultra combo and sends him into the spike pit like it's Mortal Kombat. And he's capable of doing that right out of the gate. Donald Cerrone usually likes to warm himself up a little bit first, but this is I don't want to say a toss-up. I've got Cerrone winning this fight, but I don't think it's out of the question of Gastelum taking control of this at all.
Now, in saying that, you take a look at Gastelum, the way he competes and the way he likes to put pressure on. It's not as much as Donald Cerrone would put pressure on somebody, but we're talking about a guy, like you mentioned, that potentially could be competing at 185 pounds versus a guy that says he can make 145 pounds. Knowing fighting the way you and I know, that just is Latin for there is going to be a speed advantage for Donald Cerrone. Now, if for some odd reason, if Gastelum can big brother him, get him into the clinch, take him down to the ground, the question is, who's got a better ground game? I lean towards Donald Cerrone.
I do too. And the thing is, not only is his speed going to be an advantage, but his technique. They're not even in the same universe as far as striking technique. Donald Cerrone all day, and he doesn't spar anymore. Which is a great idea for him, I think. But I'm always really excited to watch Donald Cerrone fight, and he wants to fight Damian Maia at 207. Now, if
it's just so crazy,
he knows what's up. Donald Cerrone, man, if he were 5 years younger, the UFC would market him just crazy. I don't know why they don't already. Get what you can out of him. Chris Weidman, Yoel Romero, the winner of this, given the fact that the Rockhold Jacare fight got pulled, they're probably getting a title shot. This is going to answer a whole lot of questions. Now, Yoel Romero is 39 years old. And this was the same question I had about Alexis Villa a few years ago. It's like, when does it run out? When does it run out? And for Alexis Villa, when it ran out, boy, did it run out. Because he can't buy a fight these days. He can't buy a victory these days. For those of you who don't know who that is, check out his knockout win over Joe Warren in Bellator. But Chris Weidman, also, I have questions about him too, because he had neck surgery this summer. And Kurt Angle was like, hey, get at me about some tips. If Kurt Angle's giving you tips about neck surgery, don't. Don't fight probably ever. And I love Kurt Angle, but no, don't do it. This is a hell of a fight. This is a main event. This is a main event fight. Any way you cut it. How do you think this one's going down?
I'd like to give you my opinion, but I know it's going to be biased if I ask George St. Pierre, because according to George, Chris Weidman is the best middleweight. He told me about why Anderson Silva, and he said, you watch what he does to Anderson Silva. And I was like, okay, George, whatever, buddy. I know you're the welterweight champ of the world, and blah. He goes, no. You watch. And he's been singing Weidman's praises for the longest time. I'm definitely not saying I've never been sold on Weidman. Obviously, I have. The guy's fantastic. He's done what he's done. I've had Ray Longo and Matt Serra. Sure, those guys talk. As you know, they don't stop talking. They just yip and yap nonstop. So they talked my ear off about Weidman. Still wasn't overly sold on him. Saw him fight in the UFC. Did a fantastic job. Became the champion. Defended his title. Did great. And then had that fight with Rockhold. And I was like,
defended it twice.
Yeah, right. Then he had the fight with Rockhold, and I was like, "Whoa, what's going on here?"
Three times rather. Defended his title successfully 3 times.
Whereas I'm not saying I'm not sold on Weidman. I mean, the guy is fantastic. He's great, but I've always been sold on Yoel Romero because when he decides to just go, it is going to be ugly. And I think he's going to take it to Weidman, and I think he emerges victorious. I think, the soldier of God is going to do his thing. He's going to surprise a lot of people. Then again, Weidman is fighting in his backyard, so he is going to have the Madison Square Garden audience just going absolutely ballistic for him, and that gives a lot to fighters, man. It's a lot of pressure competing at home. I've heard it 1,000 times. I've heard it from Rich Franklin. I've heard it from George St. Pierre before, that it is not easy competing at home, but this is something that he's wanted for a very long time, so he will use that as a platform, perhaps when he has to dig deep in this fight here, and I think he is going to have to dig deep in this fight. I'm not saying he's going to be finished, but if he does get finished, I won't be surprised.
Well, as we've seen with Stipe Miocic, fighting in your hometown, not always a good thing. Well, it worked out for Stipe, but Stipe has said he'd rather fight in New York than Cleveland at this point. Do you think Chris Weidman would rather fight in Cleveland than New York?
Right? Yeah.
Oh, man. That's just top flight fight right there. Joanna and Jacek.
Hold on. Who do you think's going to win?
Weidman. I think Romero might get dragged into deep waters.
Oh boy! All right,
I do, and drowned. Joanna and Jacek, Carolina Kowalkiewicz. Carolina had one of the coolest stories I had ever heard. She talked to Jim Edwards of Flow Combat this week, and she said 4 years ago, before my first fight, I bought my shorts for $1 at a secondhand store, and now I'm on an ad in Times Square. I was like, that just shows you. However, I don't think this Cinderella story is going to end too hot for her. I think Joanna Jędrzejczyk is going to brutalize her. I don't think it's going to be close. I got Joanna taking this one.
Sean Ross Sapp, this is one of those fights. It's the very reason a long time ago, when I was working with UCC and TKO, when I was first asked, what do you think of women's mixed martial arts? And I always said, you know what? No problem. Women want to get in there. They can get in there. And back then, most women in mixed martial arts, they're okay. They were pretty. Nowadays, they're bombshells. And I'm old school, man. I'm an old school Italian. You treat your women like absolute gold. You keep that pretty face as beautiful as you can. So when I see these beautiful women stepping in there and competing, there's a soft side inside of me that says they have absolutely every right to do it, but that face is going to get damaged. I had a meeting 2 days ago at a local establishment up here, and I walked in, opened the door, and there's the UFC 205 poster. Before they even asked me if I was going to watch it there, whose face did I stare at first? It wasn't Conor McGregor's. It was Carolina's face. And I'm like, you're fighting Joanna. Oh, my God. I feel bad for her.
Oh, yeah.
Because Joanna Jędrzejczyk is a murderer. And you've heard my story about when I first interviewed Joanna for the very first time, how I got trapped in the conversation, looking into her eyes and thinking, you are the sweetest person ever. And then I realized you could kill me. You are a murderer. And I think this is a different fight for Joanna because this is about Polish bragging rights. This is about going back home and what? I'm the Queen of Poland. Okay, she may not actually go home because she's in the States, whatever, living and training, blah blah. But this is Polish bragging rights. This is an emotional fight for her. It's about pride, man. It's about pride for both of them. And Johanna's going to try and prove a point here. And I feel bad for Carolina. Listen, if Carolina can do it, fantastic. I don't think she can, Sean.
I'm with you. Tyron Woodley, Stephen Thompson. There's a lot of things to look for in this fight. Stephen Thompson has such a unique style. Like, I've watched so many of his fights. Like, when he goes southpaw and he starts throwing those kicks, you gotta watch it. Now, at the same point, Tyron Woodley, he doesn't care if you're a southpaw or you're orthodox. He can take you down just the same. He can knock you out just the same. And I think that this lack of love that New York has shown him is affecting him a little bit. He wants to be loved by them so bad, but it ain't happening. Just be a jerk and go for the kill. But Stephen Thompson, who'd he lose to? Matt Brown? Man, that's a really tough fight to look at and say, well, I got the blueprint down on how to beat this guy. Because not a lot of people fight like Matt Brown. And not a lot of people fight like Matt Brown when he had to switch things up for that. This is another big fight that gets the benefit of being on a Conor McGregor on a New York City card, because this could headline a pay-per-view, but it wouldn't do that well. But on second from the top on this show, it's going to do real well, Joe.
That is promotion 101. What you just explained right there is mixed martial arts promotion 101 and building stars and putting the right match underneath a mega headliner. The winner of this fight, I think potentially, could be a household name after Saturday night, whoever emerges victorious, because prior to those two stepping into the octagon, it's going to be the highlight reels and the explanation of how this fight got put together, and the stories and the backstories are going to be told, and you're going to have to, people that have never heard of them or don't understand them or barely know them are going to have to make a decision as to who they want to win, and how that's how emotional programming works. You're attached to somebody, now you want to see them win. You're going to see that happen on Saturday night, and the way these two are matched up with one another, like you said, whenever the first time I had a chance to see Stephen Thompson compete, I called one of his fights. He actually competed in the only kickboxing fight that we had on a card, an all MMA or an MMA card with one kickboxing fight for Apex Championship Fighting. I think it was back in 2003. So it's about 13 years ago when I first met him and his dad, Roy. And what I saw in the ring was just like, oh my God, this guy is throwing high kicks when they're literally in the clinch. His foot would just come up and shin kick a guy, and he was going backwards and throwing spinning things. I'm like, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in front of my eyes. And will he be able to do that with Tyron Woodley? Like you mentioned, Tyron doesn't give a, in the great words of Stone Cold Steve Austin's, rat's ass about what you bring to the cage. He's going to be in your face putting on some pressure. Now, we saw what happens when he gets outstruck. He's just got to be careful, but then he fights Robbie Lawler and does what he did. Now, not to say Robbie Lawler doesn't have any footwork, but Robbie Lawler will be more than happy to sit there, be stagnant, and stand there and stand and bang. Thompson won't. Wonderboy will not sit there and allow Tyron to do that. So it's going to be an interesting dynamic to see if Tyron can actually get, because he's going to be explosive. We know that. He's going to wait for his opportunity. But while he's waiting for that opportunity, and it's going to have to likely be a counter situation, Wonderboy's going to pepper him. Wonderboy's going to pepper him. If he doesn't get off properly, doesn't get off right, he's going to start losing rounds. And it's a 5-round fight. You need to win 3 of the 5 rounds. So it remains to be seen how this fight's going to go. It's a difficult one to pick, but Tyron needs one power punch to really hurt Thompson. And if that happens, could be ugly and over real quick.
Thompson's stance prevents, it's really good at preventing those types of punches. So I'm really interested to see how that plays out as well. But it's just so hard to make it work from there. And generally when you're in that stance, getting kicked in the knee, like those downward kicks to the knee, is a concern. Not against Tyron Woodley. He doesn't throw kicks like that. So Stephen Thompson's style is very good, I think, for this fight. But if it goes to the ground, it's like I think it's Woodley all day there. So that remains to be seen. Also, there's another fight on the show. Eddie Alvarez, Conor McGregor, real quick. Do you care about it?
No, who's tuning in for that?
Not double championship. Eddie Alvarez defends the lightweight championship against Conor McGregor. This is a categorically different fight than McGregor's other fight above 145 pounds in the UFC. They are the same height, but McGregor has a distinct reach advantage. And when you are Conor McGregor and you have a distinct reach advantage, you have to be really, really happy about that, considering how accurate he is, how good he is about keeping people on the end of his punches. Like Eddie Alvarez is a 69-inch reach. McGregor's at like 75 or 74, something like that. One thing I want to address, it's something that somebody brought up to me, and they're like, Conor McGregor says that fighters are never the same after they fight him, and that's not true. I completely disagree. Jose Aldo won his last fight, but he's so messed up about Conor McGregor that he wants to retire. He wants to fight McGregor, or he doesn't want to fight at all. Where's Chad Mendez right now? He ain't fighting for the next 2 years. Where's Dennis Seaver been for the last year? He ain't been winning, I know that much. Nate Diaz, much like Jose Aldo, does not want to fight again unless he fights Conor McGregor. Where's Diego Brandao? Because he ain't in the UFC. Where's Marcus Brimage? He ain't in the UFC either. Dustin Poirier got the hell out of the division, which he needed to do well before. He and Max Holloway are really the best cases, in my opinion, for saying, well, no, Conor McGregor doesn't change people. It seems to me like his mind games go much further than the fight that actually happens. It sticks with these people for a lifetime. Now, I'm not going to say that he's going to mow down Eddie Alvarez or even beat him, but I watched this Embedded, and I think that Alvarez is hashtag gotten to.
Well, to start off here, when you started off breaking down the fight, you mentioned reach. And for anyone that doesn't understand reach, I'm not sure, Sean, if you've ever read this book here.
By Reed?
Yeah. Fightnomics.
Yes, I have.
Did you read the back? My name's right there. Anyways,
it?
Yeah, it is. It is second to the bottom. I'm above Stephan Bonner, below Kenny Florian, with Chael Sonnen and Greg Jackson.
I need to get my copy back.
He actually wrote a chapter started because of a conversation him and I had about scoring in mixed martial arts. But the one beautiful thing there's a couple things in this book that are absolutely just amazing. I know it's got its critics and stuff like that. But one of the things that Reed talks about that I loved was the importance of the clinch. This is why I talked to you about the Kelvin Gastelum Donald Cerrone fight. Reach and the stats showing what happens when a certain amount of reach between two opponents hits 4 inches, 5 inches, and above. In this fight here, if I'm not mistaken, it's a 6-inch reach advantage for Conor McGregor. That is super bad news for Eddie Alvarez, especially considering
it's listed at 5, but how accurate are they? So
okay, even at 5, that's where the scale sort of goes up, and you can start looking at a bad situation for the guy with the lower reach. Conor McGregor's precision is insane. What I'm concerned about is, not that he's been injury prone, but in that fight with Diaz, the last fight with Diaz, we saw the Conor McGregor we thought was going to show up, and then all of a sudden, whoa boy, he got injured and the pace slows down. Again, it's a 5-round fight. He's entered into another 5-round fight. He will be ready. But Eddie Alvarez is going to put the pressure on him. And I see Eddie Alvarez doing anything and everything possible to get past that reach and just use those thunderous body shots to punish McGregor nonstop. That's what I'm looking at in this fight here. If he continues to land them while defending himself, it's going to be a long night for Conor McGregor, in my opinion. If he can't do that and Conor McGregor does what Conor McGregor does, guys can hold 2 titles and make UFC history.
Now, an interesting thing about McGregor's style, he is able to avoid body shots in the middle of the cage very well because of that reach and his stance, where he's out like this a lot. It's really, really hard to get inside of him on the body. So Diaz worked to do that up against the cage. I would like to think McGregor has probably trained to stay away from that a lot. And Nate Diaz and his brother are really 2 of the best in the sports history about working someone up against the cage and going at their body. I can't count how many times I've seen one of the Diaz boys and they get somebody's back to a cage. That's the fight. That's a wrap. That's like Ronda Rousey grabbing a hold of your arm. That's like, it's like Crow Cop throwing a left head kick. You're cooked after that. And Conor McGregor was able to surprisingly survive that. Now, I say that, I think Eddie Alvarez may have a little bit more power behind his, or not a little bit, I think he has a lot more power behind his punches than Nate Diaz does. He has went the distance with regularity since like 2012, I think, but he's not had a dominant fight outside of the Dos Anjos fight in the last 4 years. That's it. The Chandler fight, close. The Cerrone fight, he lost. The Melendez and Pettis fight, those were close. And now he's facing, in my opinion, a much more accurate striker than any of those guys. If he had struggles with Anthony Pettis earlier this year, I wonder how the McGregor fight will go. Because McGregor, in my opinion, has much more power than Anthony Pettis, even at 155. It's such an interesting fight. And in my opinion, Alvarez has to get inside. He has to apply pressure. Also, I mean, McGregor does have the benefit. He went 5 rounds a couple months ago. Alvarez has not went 5 rounds in 3 years. I'm sure he does in training all the time, but he hasn't been taken that far. McGregor knows now that he can make it. He can make it. Even if he's exhausted in the second round, he can make it happen. This fight it's going to be history making for one way or the other. And if McGregor loses, he's going to drop down to 145 and defend that title because that's what McGregor does. This is going to be a legendary night, Joe. I cannot wait for UFC 205. We will have a post-show podcast. We've got all kinds of stuff. All the media you need from UFC 205 is at Fightful.com. Go there, register. We'll be here with Matt Riddle tomorrow afternoon. The show is open to non-members as well. I made sure that Joe's was too this week. That way, these are time sensitive this week, especially. Usually we have to make Joe's available for non-members anyway because we're previewing an event that happened Saturday. But Joe, we went well over our normal hour, but anything you want to leave the people with besides telling them to follow Fightful online on Twitter? Before this legendary show, you've got several pieces that will release this week.
Yeah, and I'm hoping my wife watches this podcast, so she believes that the fact that this event on Saturday is in fact an unbelievable event and potentially the greatest and biggest UFC event of all time. We know it is. The articles will speak for themselves. This podcast will speak for itself. It's going to be a long Saturday. We will likely be exhausted after the pay-per-view, but I'm looking forward to discussing whether or not Conor McGregor made history, whether my boy Bilal Muhammad won, whether Frankie Edgar won, if Sean was corrected, Chris Weidman, I'm right with you, El Romero. So much to discuss, and it's only Wednesday. I mean, there's so much still that has to go on. So looking forward to it and catching up with everybody on here at Fightful on Saturday. But check out the site for more of my articles. I'm looking forward to writing some interesting pieces.
Guys, I am back tomorrow afternoon with Matt Riddle. We have all kinds of news updates, MMA, boxing, pro wrestling on the site. Live viewing party of UFC 205. Our forums are up now. Use them. They're awesome. We're going to be doing contests and stuff. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully, UFC 205's podcast won't be like an hour and 45 minutes like our UFC 200 one was. I think it was UFC 200. Geez, because we got to get some sleep. But we'll be here right after UFC 205. Until next time, guys, thank you very much.